Welcome everybody to this extraordinary meeting held on the 7th of August 2024. First of all, may I firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we meet on today. I humbly pay my respects to the people of the Wiradjuri and Ngunnawal nations, their past, present and emerging elders. Now I note that there are a number of people in attendance, and if you're asked to evacuate, the emergency procedure is to exit via the door leading out of the building directly outside the council chambers and proceed to the footpath opposite the council chambers and await further instructions. This council meeting is being streamed live, recorded and published in accordance with council's live streaming in council meetings policy. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the council, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The Chair and or the General Manager have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of the debate is considered misleading, defamatory or potentially inappropriate to be published. And attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and or unacceptable behaviour and or comments. Public forum, we do have a speaker in the public forum today, and it's Mr. Craig Fulmer, who is speaking for the motion. Mr. Fulmer, you have 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
All 5 minutes this time.
Yeah.
Sorry, a little bit of levity.
No double minutes. I've just been told by the GM.
Madam Mayor and councillors and senior staff, I stand before you on behalf of the McLaughlin family that are with me today. I wish to again reinforce my previous 3 points. Point 1, but today, after a discussion with the General Manager, for now, we'll put that aside on our opinion of the February to March progression on the report. Point 2, this proposal meets and defeats the planning objective required to be addressed. No unplanned rural residential development is proposed. It is consistent to what surrounds it. Point 3, the subject lot is of lesser agricultural worth than the rest of the farm, and this has been confirmed by an agricultural scientist, being an agronomist. On point 1, I'm led to believe the matter has received advice, so that whilst we hold a differing view, I'll leave that alone tonight, as we believe it can be debated on merit alone. On point 2, and in terms of merit, the only objective required to be satisfied in this case is to minimise unplanned rural residential development. There are no less than 8 adjoining or adjacent properties that are considerably less than half the zone minimum. The 2 immediately adjacent, the properties across Powderley's Lane, are half the proponent's lot size at 4.5 hectares. The other lot adjacent on Powderley's Lane is also zone undersized and occupied, being approximately the same size as the subject lot. Across Henry Lawson Way is a 5-lot subdivision at considerably half the minimum lot size, carried out a few years ago by someone known to councillors. 4 of these have houses and they average 10 hectares. The other adjacent house and last to be completed was another section 4.6 concession by this council to approximately 11 hectares. In summary, how is it possible to minimise unplanned rural residential development when the land in question is surrounded on almost 3 sides by 8 precedents? That's right, 8 rural residential precedents exist on top of this lot. Numerous times now I've heard councillors and staff talk about the line of protecting the LAP. The LAP has done no work on RU1 and RU4 lot sizes of 1, 2, 4, 10 or 24 hectare land. All action on these zones was deferred at the LAP adoption meeting. This LAP does not protect anything in the rural zone or have any new thinking. The rural study is slated for tenders being called very soon. So if there is nothing to be protected, because it's all about to be reanalysed. Again, 8 precedents exist immediately adjoining and adjacent this allotment. How is it sensible to not permit the worst land on the farm to do exactly what all the neighbours are doing on this orphan block behind the homestead? This makes for great Class 4 merit appeal to the Land Environment Court, other than the previous procedural fairness appeal. On point 3, a qualified agronomist has stated what a travesty it would be to see anywhere else on the farm other than this allotment with sloped rocks and wet drained areas to be excised. The farmer's daughter is seeking this piece of lesser worth land as an intergenerational transfer without causing mass disruption to the rest of the farm. It's on the blind side of the house from the farm. It has some but limited potential as it weighs down the main farm presently. It is surrounded by 8 dwellings on smaller allotments, especially 2 at half this lot size. Do not make the productive farm be split up to forsake a poor quality lot beside other smaller occupied lots. Recognise that 8 precedents exist adjacent and save the remainder of the farm. This lot exists, as I keep saying, amongst 8 precedents, one of which was specifically voted and adopted by this council in 2021. I encourage you to support this notice of motion as it makes sense from a logical and a planning perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Filmer. Question?
You mentioned then that the land has the rocky outlet stores and stuff, but water. If council tonight approve the allotment, what are we going to do, or what is the young lady going to do when she builds a house about the water?
The house, in a biblical sense, will be built upon the rock, built on the high land. That's what the site plan within the reports that have been tabled with council. The land has an intermittent gully or drainage line from about 2/3 of the way down through to the dam at the bottom of the property. And currently sick or cast away cows from the herd are put on this block. So it has some but limited potential.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ford. We'll now go back to the statement of ethical obligation. Councillors are reminded that they will undertake the duties of the office of councillor in the best interests of the local government area and the Hilltops Council, and that they faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in them under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of their ability and judgment as per their oath or affirmation of office made under section 233A of the Local Government Act 1993. Attendance. We do have applications for leave from Councillor Dodd for carer's leave and Councillor Hewson for medical reasons, and also an application from Councillor Flannery to attend digitally. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ingram, and a seconder. Councillor Mackie, those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, everybody. All right, we'll move on to the business before us tonight. And that is the notice of motion. AOM 6.1 2406 motion, DAR 2024-0001 section 8.2 review of DA 2023-0187 dwelling house at 902 Henry Lawson Way, Young. Notice of motion was received from Councillor Ingram and Councillor Flannery. And so here we are.
I'd like to move the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. Councillor Ingram.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, we've been through all this at some considerable length at the last meeting, but I'll just touch on a few points without going into the full depth of what I said last time. But there's a few matters to be dealt with. Firstly, that I mentioned last time, and it's in regard to staff are sanctioned with bringing forward recommendations to council based on what they have in front of them and legislation and LEPs and DCPs and all the rules and regulations, and staff. That's what staff do. They bring a recommendation to council on that. What we do as councillors then is to just see how that works and how it fits into our community, because our community put us here. So that's our role in the process. The more I look at this request for this DA, the more it seems to have all those things about it I spoke about. A bit of common sense, logic, practicality. One of the matters mentioned against this DA was the size of the allotment, and has been pointed out by the Speaker on a couple of occasions. It's surrounded by similar sized blocks, and the gentleman he spoke about, or the person he spoke about who did that was I. It's not as if this is a one-off in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of thousands of acres. It is surrounded by blocks virtually the same size. We can't say we can't give the variation. It's a 62% variation that's been asked for. At the very last council meeting a fortnight ago, we unanimously voted through a similar thing on the other side of town with a variation of 67%. So that's obviously not a problem. The other part about the report that staff have to use is they don't want to see this and the wasting of good grazing land. So by saying no to this DA would mean you would be destroying more grazing land, because the block would have to be made bigger and cut more land off that couldn't be used to be farmed as the farmers do with it now. So they've decided to cut off a corner of non-productive land, basically, that fits in with the surrounding areas. That makes good common sense and good logic, and it can be done. I know last time some speakers spoke about the LEP and what's in the LEP. This council proved you can destroy the LEP. It's been destroyed by, we turned residential land into industrial land in town. When I say we, council, not all of us, but yeah. So to sit on our righteous chairs and say that we couldn't go along with this because it's not in the LEP would be a bit incredulous. I think disingenuous is the word I'm after. So the Speaker spoke in regard to those matters. The other thing about it, this DA being approved will not impede one person. It will not affect anyone else in the community. It's a family farm that they want to have a daughter to have a house on. It doesn't impede or interfere with any other person in any way, shape or form. So I would be seeking the support of councillors on those grounds to approve this DA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Before we continue with the debate, look, I'm very aware that we need to make a decision on this. And so I'm just making clear that subsequent to the debate, I am actually going to foreshadow a motion. And that motion is to refuse the DA, number DA 2023-0187, for a dwelling house on lot 322, DP 754582, 902 Henry Lawson Way, Young, as seen on page 6 of the agenda, as recommended by staff.
I might just mention, Madam Mayor, that doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a decision made. We tried that at the last meeting and failed on both.
Well,
voted in and voted out. Just letting you know, Madam Mayor.
I know that. I understand that, and we don't want to be back in that conundrum. But I am just foreshadowing. All right. Okay, we have had one person speak for the motion. Do we have anybody speaking against it? Councillor Foreman.
General Manager, I guess I have made my opinion or my feelings clear that I do support the LEP as a guiding document that we should follow with the case that Councillor Ingram has mentioned that had historical reasons, the one that you keep referring to in town that we so there was a lot went on with that one. But anyway, look, I do have concerns about the land use conflict. I did read, and there's a lot of good information from pages 31 through to 33. So the land use conflict is an actual concern with anybody, with anything around the town. If the daughter decides to sell that said block, then there can be issues. The buffer zone is also an issue. I don't think the requirements, the buffer zone, I think in the motion it has about putting a double row of trees in as a some way of rectifying the buffer zone. So we have a 62% variation plus. It doesn't cover the buffer zone plus. There's a land use a possibility of a land use conflict going forward. And I sort of, I read the report, and on page 33, the variations that have been set, there's only one in 2014, 2021 and 2021, and the variations are 16%, 27.5% and 2.2%. So there's never been a 62% variation. So I just have concerns.
Except for the one we voted on last week.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery.
You can't, you've got...
Councillor Flannery.
Yes.
Councillor Foreman has the right to speak without interruption.
Well, tell the facts.
Thank you. She has the right to speak without being interrupted.
Well, then you should, as mayor, you should correct her about facts.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. Councillor Foreman, if you'd like to go ahead. Thank you.
Look, I also think too, there is no reason that I can see, and on the land usage, there is 24 hectares, which is the minimum. So it's not like this development is an absolute no, you cannot put a home on it. You can put it on, but you can put it there on 24 and follow the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Would somebody another councillor like to speak for?
Yes, I'd like to speak for, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Flannery, off you go.
Madam Mayor, look, I think it's regrettable that you didn't correct Councillor Foreman on the facts. We voted 2 weeks ago on a 67% variation. So, since you like to constantly state our beautiful hilltops, we either go back to being localised to a few hectares when we choose the percentages, as Councillor Foreman's choosing to do, or we deal with the fact that variations apply whether it's rural, non-rural, residential. I mean, to be so misguided and to misstate the facts, I think is reprehensible, number one. And it should have been corrected by you, Madam Mayor. Number two, to say that you're concerned about buffer zones is a joke. We rezoned land in Young to industrial. You know why? The truth is because we gave up. We got sick to death of dealing with the noise. So the easiest way to deal with the residents' complaints was to turn it into industrial land. That's what we did. And you turn around and say 9 hectares out on the side of Young has potential down the future for having land use conflict. I mean, give me a break. How about we do the decent?
Yeah, take respect to Councillor.
How about we do the decent?
Thank you, Councillor Foreman.
No, don't interrupt, please.
Councillor Flannery, you can speak to this topic, please, and stay away from making personal comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How about we use some common sense here, deal with everyone equally. So if rural ratepayers have the right to be dealt with in the same manner as urban or residential ratepayers, if it's good enough for the goose, it is good enough for the gander. Now, surely to goodness, we can have some decency and respect for the family who are choosing to elect to subdivide off a portion of their land. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak against? In which case, I'll make some comments before Councillor Ingram, since you moved it, you can have right of reply.
Yeah, we will, Madam Mayor.
All right.
You're speaking against, Madam Mayor?
I am speaking against. And once again, the LEP, of which I was part of, and it was ably chaired by Councillor who is not with us, is there to guide and direct the future of our beautiful hilltops, may I say. of course, when there's variation, it comes to council, and that's part of the democratic process, that when there's a variation, it comes before us. It's up to us as individuals to say, are we going to support the foundations or the documents that give the foundations to the way that our local government area will grow. In this case, having read and listened to both sides of the arguments, it doesn't seem to me that there is enough cause, if you like, to make this variation. It seems to me that with cooperation and working out, then the dwelling can be there still within the guidelines of the LEP. There is the concern that if property moves out of a family, then these small blocks,
What a joke.
they be able, thank you. Would they be able to support a small scale agricultural development? No, but if following the guidance of the LEP, that is a possibility, especially as we're looking for more intensive farming.
Oh, rubbish.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery.
What you're saying is rubbish.
Thank you. I am still speaking. Thank you. And for that reason, I can see both sides of the argument, but for this, I don't see that I have been persuaded enough to go against the recommendation of the LEP. Now, we have had 2 speakers for, 2 speakers against. Every councillor has the right to make a comment in the public forum.
Like to put the motion, Madam Mayor.
All right.
Right of reply, thank you.
All right. So you want the motion to be put?
I do. We've had 2 for, 2 against.
Yes, but I'm just saying everybody has the right.
I'm just saying I'd like to have the motion put.
Okay. All right. We'll vote on that.
I'll have my right of reply first, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Right of reply, and then we'll put it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. With the greatest respect to the Mayor and my colleague, the Deputy Mayor, again, mention the LEP and the guidance, and it's there to guide us. I'll mention again how councillors destroyed the LEP very recently. Nothing to do with historical, very recently. Turning residentially zoned land in town, in Young Township, to industrial. Did it impede anyone? Ask the people who live next door whether it impedes them or not. Does it destroy the Showground precinct and the horse and the rural residential area? You bet it does. Did that weigh on councillors' minds when that vote went through? Not a bit. Let's get back to this one we're talking about. We're not talking about what happened to the LEP. So we need to rub the LEP defence clean out of it. It just doesn't work. Again, with the greatest respect to my fellow councillor, the variance of 62% and then the variance of the 67% that I mentioned that we unanimously voted for at our very last meeting 2 weeks ago, of course it comes into play. The meeting before that, we voted a 70% variance for a matter in town. So that just recertifies the point that that's what we're here for, to make the decisions. The staff come to us with recommendations because they've got guidelines to go by. We come in here because we're elected by the community to make decisions to see if those recommendations fit or have to be followed. In this particular case, I have very strong feelings that this can be done without, as I said, impeding absolutely anyone. It will actually have a positive effect by disrupting less farmland that would be necessary if you were to go to the 24 hectares. The surrounding blocks, as I've stated, are all of that size. It's not as if it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. We talk about what happens if the family decide to sell or the daughter decides to sell. Well, you start talking about the future like that, we could win Lotto next week, we mightn't be. So to refuse a DA on the unknown into the future doesn't have a lot of substance behind it either. So councillors, again, I would ask you to support my motion to allow this DA that, as I said, will impede absolutely no one. And thank you again for your time.
Okay, thank you, councillor Ingram. Nobody has anything else. I think we can just put to the floor, put it to the vote. Yep. Those in favour? Three. Four. Those against? Okay, thank you, everybody. The motion is passed. Thank you. I will close
Thank you,
the
councillors.
meeting now at
Common sense, thank you.
4:55 p.m. Thank you.